It's time for the 1430 Connection on 1430 WNAV and 99.9 FM, spotlighting news, newsmakers, and important community issues. Now, with this week's edition of the 1430 Connection, here is WNAV news anchor Donna Cole.
Welcome to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. Joining me in the studio today is Mike Lofton. He's chair of the Arundel County Water Access Committee, and Matt O'Neill, who is a long-time resident of the Mayo Peninsula and also president of his community association. Thank you for joining me today, both of you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to read something on Anne Arundel County's website first. We'll start this off with this quote. Even with 540 miles of breathtaking waterfront, residents are surprised to find that public water access is extremely limited in Anne Arundel County. The Anne Arundel County Water Access Committee was established in the spring of 2016 by Executive Order Number 19 due to County Executive Shu's commitment to the citizens of Anne Arundel County to increase public access to local waterways for a number of activities. This goes on. Mike's Water Access Committee is, though not altogether too old, he has been lobbying for more water access for how many years, Mike?
20
years. So he's been doing this for quite a long time.
We're not a month old in terms of our the commission's activities, but
the committee has been a long.
Yeah, the
long
committee
time.
has been forming and since about 2009, roughly.
Okay,
like that.
What are some of your successes getting more water access in the county?
Over the years, Sherry and I, my wife, we'd go out looking for places to walk, particularly in the wintertime. We like to get to the water. We started looking at maps and, oh my gosh, look at all this public property that's on the water. So that was really the genesis of the committee and the movement to improve access. Specifically in terms of new access points, there's probably about a dozen in the last 3 or 4 years that have either been, access has been improved or access where there was none previously. Starting to the south, Franklin Point State Park, it's almost 400 acres, bayfront, purchased in the 90s to preempt an unwanted residential development. And as so often the case, the ribbon cuttings and the happy event took place. The chain went up, the keep out sign went up, and it was closed for decades. And as you march north, Jack Creek Park, Shady Side Park, which actually had waterfront that I don't think anybody realized, and probably for less than $50. We got some wood chips laid down, and you actually have a kayak access point into Parish Creek there. Moving around onto the Mayo Peninsula, probably Beverly Triton is the most significant improvement. When I first started looking around, Beverly Triton was a permit access. And this is probably 03, 04. Something like that. And I said, okay, I'm going to figure out how to get one of these permits. And there was a superintendent or a caretaker who lived in the house. You had to meet his wife at the fence between 6 and 6:30, give her a $5 bill, and you got a card that gave you 30 days of access for a very limited kind
Matt's
of things.
smiling. You remember this.
Yes, I do.
Get those permits.
And it's not unlike Thomas Point Park.
Right, which is another one that is kind of Byzantinely, if that's a word, managed with permits and confusing access. I don't know if you've had the experience yourself,
I have.
But it's like that. Moving along, Mayo Beach, Mayo really is the wasted opportunity. It is a fully developed park, as was Beverly Triton, accommodated hundreds, if not thousands of people, pre-Bay Bridge, pre-desegregation. Mayo has full facilities, actually is the only, well, now that Fort Smallwood is open, up until a few weeks ago, was the only place that had a public health permit to operate as a county beach, and that's at Mayo. So we've been encouraging increased opening. Mayo is now open for about 15 or 16 Sundays between 11 and 5. Homeport Farm, that's another one where in the negotiations for a residential development, the developer, in that case, gave some property for a public park. Same scenario, there was a planning committee, actually a report done. And again, the chain went up, the keep out sign went up.
All land that was set aside for county residents to use, but nobody could use it.
Correct. I mean, I can go on up on the, there's places on the Severn, there's places on the Magathie, and it goes on.
Since you've been part of this from the beginning, have you seen as much contention towards any of these parks as you have, and some of this contention Matt's going to address, as you have towards the Mayo parks?
Maybe in different forms. At Spriggs Farm on the Magathie, the neighbors blocked cars. So after it was open, they put on their own locks. At Homeport Farm, somebody dug a trench down the trail that you might fall into on your way to the water. There's been the Mayo folks are pleasantly nonviolent.
Let's keep it that way.
They haven't tried to hurt anybody yet, and I can't say that's the case everywhere. So.
All right, we're coming close to a commercial break, but Matt, we talked briefly before the interview started. Your biggest concern has been communication.
It's one of our biggest concerns.
Tell me about that, just about that part of it, and then we'll go on to starting the next part of this show with you.
The most concerning thing by way of communication for us is the majority of the residents of the peninsula really don't feel like they've been informed about the plans of the county to develop the parks. They don't feel like they're informed on what the parks are going to look like, how many people are going to be attending, and what that's going to do to our traffic and environment. So you're absolutely right. That's one of the largest concerns we have is the transparency as far as the county goes is limited, and I feel like we all need to be, before moving forward, we all need to be educated so that we can get our opinions in, our knowledge of the area, and it can be used correctly as far as moving forward.
All right, let's talk about that when we come back. We're going to take a short break. This is the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. In the studio with me is Mike Lofton, chair of the Arundel County Water Access Committee.
And Commission.
Commission.
Got two hats.
And Matt O'Neill, who's a resident of the Mayo Peninsula, president of his community association. We're talking about a number of parks that are either already on the Mayo Peninsula or maybe more coming. Matt, you were just discussing about lack of communication that you feel is weighed into this. And actually, Mike, over break, you said you don't disagree.
I don't. I don't think the communications have been handled nearly as well as they could be. I've made suggestions and recommendations to the county administration about this. I would say that Rec and Parks did create a committee last fall made up predominantly of Peninsula residents. And I don't know, Matt, whether you all have gotten, if that's news to you or not. I hope it's not news to you.
Just recently, we've become aware of that. As a community, one of our, my biggest concerns in getting started on this whole thing was as a community president, or the way that the communication works is the information is given to me and then I translate it to my particular community. And as a community leader, I was not informed in any way by way of that committee or in any of the plans, minus a couple little things on Facebook here and there that I had heard, which caused me to dig. So that was my primary.
Okay. So you expect somebody from the county to email you and say, here's the plans, here's what we're thinking, here are the meetings. Right. You then relay it to your community. And likewise for every community down on the Mayo Peninsula.
Right. And then after digging a little bit, I have been put on the email list as a leader, and then there's no shortage of concern as I inform my community residents. It's pretty eye-opening how many people are concerned with it as soon as they get that information.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm seeing it on Facebook. You have a Facebook group for the
neighbors of Mayo Peninsula, yes.
And then there's a Stop Mayo Overdevelopment website. Concerns of the community are the number of parks that are there already.
Yes.
The possibility of another park in the future, which would be
the Mayo Clearwater Way. Once it's abandoned, will be turned back over to Parks and Rec, and then may become another park, was the idea that we were told by the county.
Is that true, Mike, that's a possibility?
I don't think there have been any decisions made. I mentioned that a group was formed last fall, and a planning process was initiated then. The scope of that planning process was South River Farm, Mayo Beach, Beverly Triton, and Carr's Wharf. Now, I think since that got started, the decision to change the treatment plant operations, the sewage handling, and I don't have a lot of knowledge on this, is going to make the property that Matt talked about surplus to the county's needs. I had heard at one point that they might move Rec and Parks maintenance operations out of South River Farm over to that site.
Right.
So, but I don't think any decisions have been made. And I certainly agree with and respect the concern about information. Information's too hard to get.
Let me ask you, the Beverly Triton, 300 acres, or maybe over 300, but give or take a few, needed a permit, no longer, but there's no parking and amenities. That will be coming? That's the plan, to add parking and amenities?
No. I mean, right now we're in the planning process. And I guess this is what sort of surprised and disappointed me during the last budget session. Commission that the appropriation that was asked for fiscal 17, beginning this July, was money for planning. It was to produce professional analysis of what the park might be.
Right.
And I would add that there was a master plan done for Beverly Triton in the year 2000. Again, that plan was guided by a committee of local residents that called for extensive improvements in the park. So what's on the table now is planning, and the money that is in the budget that survived the attempt to remove it is planning money. And I think that's where we all need to come to the table and say what's reasonable, what's rational. Just as a citizen, my goal here is to have parks that are create value for the immediate residents and the citizens at large. I'm listening to Diane Rehm on the way in, one of your colleagues, and she's interviewing Sally Jewell. This is the 100th anniversary, so part of the National Park system.
Parks, right.
So we know how to run parks in this country. We can do this, I think, in a way that will be an asset to all
Agreed.
hands.
I think what Matt is concerned with, and Matt, you can help me out with this. You know, when I'm looking at Homeport Farm Park, which I go to often, and I love it, the county actually had to put more barriers to stop, I believe, people with kayaks from driving all the way down to the water.
Right.
Which I saw while I was there. People with kayaks trying to drive all the way down
Sure.
on a wooded path that wasn't meant for it.
Right.
So they put more barriers out. You have people, unfortunately, living there at night. You have diapers being left by people that are unfortunately living there at night. There are no trash cans. It's become a dumping ground, and it's not huge, fortunately, but there's things being left there. I think these are some of the concerns, and of course the road is not paved, which I like. Keep it natural. They're doing the bare minimum job of making sure people can get in there when
I've seen
it's
turkeys
flooded.
and foxes on the road.
Right.
So.
And I've seen groundhogs,
Right.
bunnies, the whole 9 yards.
Right.
But I think you're concerned about some of these happening down here.
Absolutely. This is my opinion, particularly is as an outdoorsman. I love the concept of leaving a large ecosystem on its own, leaving it untouched by man. I think we don't have to look very hard to see, we may be doing great in the national parks, and, some of them are wonderful, but the reality is human beings have a way of destroying things. I am concerned with the development of it, with some of the things you had just mentioned, and then also just the traffic, just the human beings.
There is one way onto the Mayo Peninsula and one way off. It's
Exactly.
214.
Yeah. And when I say traffic, I was actually primarily talking just about foot traffic, just the human beings trampsing through the ecosystem itself. We've already seen a good bit of trees being cut down at Beverly Triton to make a path around the park, and I believe that's just just the beginning of the changes to the ecosystem, and we are not aware at this point about the impacts that they're going to have just on the environment there, the ecosystem itself, not to mention our communities, like you had mentioned before, and our quality of life there. The vehicle traffic is another very large concern of ours as a community, however.
So let's talk about more of these when we come back, Mike. I know you want to address this. Let's talk about do you think the county's Department of Parks and Recreation has the capabilities to oversee all this, given some of these circumstances we're seeing now? I'm Donna Cole. This is the 1430 Connection. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. In the studio with me is Mike Lofton, chair of the Anne Arundel County Water Access Committee and Commission, and Matt O'Neill, resident of the Mayo Peninsula, president of his community association. We're talking about mostly parks already on the peninsula and some that may be added in the future. And over break, we were just discussing the concern isn't just about parks. It's also, well, let's talk, Mike, you said you don't think it's going to be cars going in and off of the Mayo Peninsula at 6 o'clock in the morning to visit the parks. It's going to be.
Right. Well, again, I'm no traffic expert, but common sense would say to me, park visitors are not leaving the peninsula at 6:30, 7:30 in the morning, joining the commuter crowd that's going to work. They're probably not. The park visitors aren't traveling at all at that hour, and they're also not returning to the peninsula in the evening at 5, 6, 7 o'clock. So I would be stunned if park traffic was a significant impact on rush hour commutes. I do think the potential removal of a building moratorium because of the piping of sewage to the Annapolis treatment plant is very significant. And if there's 1,500 houses built, I don't know how many cars that equals, probably 3,000.
But it's a legitimate concern of the
Well, and the
residents.
time of day use is
Right.
is an issue. And I, as I said to Matt, I think some of the energy, the parks sort of raised their heads up first. And I think some of this energy needs to be directed at the question of additional housing on the peninsula.
And Matt, you agree?
I absolutely agree with that.
All right. So let me talk before we went to break, we were discussing some of the downside of mankind, womankind too, and dogs and whatever else, is we do tend to tramps through parks and leave a trace sometimes, not always. So do you think the county Parks and Recreation currently has the capability to supervise what they have?
Well, I think they need more people.
Okay.
Their staffing count is substantially below what it was in the year 2000. I can't quote you the precise numbers. The good news is they did get 4 new people positions in the FY17 budget, and as I recall, at least 2, maybe 3 of those are going to be assigned into areas that will improve supervision and management on the peninsula and other parks.
I've said, I've gave some other examples, but I've sadly watched 2. I think maybe one of them is historic, 2 barns being vandalized to the point of no return at Homeport Farm Park. They both had. Both were torn apart, both have been entered, both have been all sorts of, so it's a legitimate concern. And Matt, this is one of yours and other residents of the Mayo Peninsula. If we open these parks, you need somebody to supervise them.
Yes, I agree with that. To another point that we were just talking about the trampsing, on the grounds. One thing that does concern me is it's a opinion of Steve Shue. I just have a quote there. It says the more citizens that engage with the environment, the more they're likely to protect it and invest in it. Just as a good example, we're as a small community leader, I see the impact on the environment from my particular community. We see seagrasses, and we're seeing them more and more in the springtime. But the moment that everyone starts interacting with their environment, with the boats and things like that, seagrasses just disappear. And that's a good example of what I'm concerned with, environmentally speaking. The more we interact, it might not necessarily be the most positive thing. The more we interact, I think sometimes the more damage we do. So that's a concern of mine that I would like to see looked at from a realistic angle as opposed to a
environmental factor. Mike?
Sure. I mean, the reason I'm involved in this at all is I believe that the Chesapeake Bay defines this region. It is the essential character of quality of life for residents in this region. It needs a lot more friends.
For the immediate future, how do we fix the communication issue?
Again, I've made a specific recommendation. I think that anybody on the Mayo Peninsula who has a question ought to have within 24 hours. I'd rather say within 24 minutes, but the ability to pose that question and get an answer from a responsible public official who knows something, rather than, and I've seen some weird stuff about.
You said you've posed you've suggested
I've made
this.
recommendations.
Okay,
yes, I have.
Is there a step further that can be taken?
I think that there ought to be a hotline where anybody can get information. I think folks like Matt that are community leaders ought to get you tell me what the frequency, at least a weekly update. What's going on? I mean, there is a consultant
Would that be cool with you?
who's at work
Yeah,
right
absolutely,
now.
it would be. Another big concern is that once we get that information and once we voice our opinion, I do think residents, specifically on my peninsula, that's who I'm talking about, would like to know that their opinion is considered more so than it is at this point. We've been told from various officials in the county, this is what's going to happen. Now we're trying our best to inform you of what we are going to do, not what are your thoughts on this, what information can you give us, how can you educate us to make a better decision. It's just, this is how it is. We're doing our best to enlighten you about that. So that is definitely a concern of mine. We're boots on the ground. We see the environmental, we see what it is at this point. We're driving on the roads, we're the ones that are there. Exactly. And not one resident of the peninsula that I have spoken with is not greatly concerned with the traffic impact from the development of the houses and the parks as well. So
more communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And more consideration for our opinions.
Fair enough.
One more thing that you had mentioned before that I do think bears repeating is the access to the Anne Arundel County citizens. And I know the Water Access Committee has been very vocal about the fact that we all pay taxes here. We all pay for these parks, and we all pay for, our property taxes pay to buy these and fund these parks. But I do think it bears for everyone out there to know that these parks will not simply be open to Anne Arundel County residents. These parks will be open to everyone. Literally anyone that wants to attend these parks can. And the amount of numbers that may bring, it may change.
I will say, in all of my time, and how long has Hemport been open?
5 years.
I've seen maybe on one occasion there were a group of kayakers there. Every other time I'm there, and I'm there all the time, I've never seen anyone. I'm the only one there. Thank you both for joining me today.
Great. Matt, we need to keep this conversation going.
Absolutely.
I do hope you continue this conversation. I'm Donna Cole. This is the 1430 Connection. We'll see you next week.